I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, so I'd like to start on time. And it is a little bit after 7. Thank you. So welcome everyone. We appreciate you being here tonight. I just want to quickly introduce some of the board members that are here. We have Megan Doyle, Anna Tedros, Jen Brown, Nicole Wilhelm, Mary Claire Evans, Adam Scobie is in the back. Is that it? Tom Kova. Sorry, Tom. Nicole Flowers. So just to begin with a little timeline of the work that we've done to date so that everybody is grounded in the same place. During our budget cycle in early 2023, as part of a discussion about reinstating a $1.8 million budget reduction, the board then was asked by city leaders to conduct a long-range facilities study. So it was implied that enrollment has declined, budget increases being requested year over year were not sustainable, and we need to look at consolidating buildings. And still, in the past 3 years, $2.8 million have been reduced from our annual operating budget, despite our commitment to do this long-range facilities planning work. So for nearly 3 years now, the board has taken this opportunity to discuss what the future of the Milford Public Schools infrastructure should look like, based on a host of data points that are all available on the Milford Public Schools website. So there's QR codes on your tables if you want to bring up any of the information. But on the Milford Public Schools website, there's a facilities planning link, and all of our information is listed there that we collected over the years. So we started with a review of current enrollment projections, and the capacity of our buildings based on current use and needs. Pre-K-12 enrollment is down almost 2,500 students from 20 years ago, and pre-K-5 enrollment is about 1,200 fewer students. And we have the same number of schools minus 1. We know that after this large decline, enrollment has stabilized and is expected to remain fairly flat. Apartments have been going up in the city for a while now without affecting the overall enrollment, and demographers have repeatedly told us that the 1- and 2-bedroom apartments being built are not expected to bring a large number of children into the district. And we know that our needs today are very different. Elementary STEM labs, world language, art, music, special education needs, career exploration and pathways either did not exist 20 years ago or have changed over time. We also looked at the current building conditions and the future maintenance needs based on life expectancies of systems like pipes and plumbing, roofs, and HVAC. So most of our buildings lack air conditioning. We learned our buildings are 50 to 75 years old and will require multi-millions in investment dollars going forward. And in many cases, our buildings do not meet the needs of 21st century school. The work continued with focus groups and surveys that garnered about 1,200 responses. We asked folks to weigh in on some guiding principles for school facilities. The 3 top priorities were air conditioning and climate control, health and safety, and equity and access and facilities modernization were a close third. Some of the other things mentioned were separating gym and cafeteria space in elementary school, which Dr. Taya has mentioned a few times in her speaking with us, larger classrooms and appropriate spaces for specials like the arts, STEM, and very importantly, special education needs. And then in early 2025, we held 2 community conversations attended by around 100 people in each session. Through all of this feedback we've learned, the community seems ready to move away from the status quo, understanding that our buildings are old and it may be time to begin replacement. We've learned that people are okay with change and consolidation if it's done with planning and intention, and parents would like more opportunities for their children in parity among schools. So now, alongside all of this facilities work we've done, during its regular meetings, the board has engaged in discussion about current instructional programs, the hopes for future programming, conversation about our annual budget, of course, and all of our work is based on 4 cornerstone documents. 2 or 3 middle schools, and 6 elementary schools. We then enlisted the help of the consultant, Perkins Eastman, who you'll meet in a few minutes, after the final steps of the process. Their findings indicated there was no viable land to accommodate one comprehensive high school, so the final plan will envision renovations of the 2 current facilities. After hearing the consultant's report on middle schools, the board made the decision to consolidate into 2 middle schools, east and west. And with these decisions, Perkins Eastman was tasked with recommending to us how to get from our current configuration to the desired configuration of 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 6 elementary schools. And again, all of this work, documents, videos are online. And that's what brings us to tonight's focus on their recommended draft long-range facilities master plan. So before turning things over to Dr. Pataya and then Perkins Eastman, I do want to reiterate the board's commitment to your children. Safety is a given. We've stated our commitment to maintaining our current class size guidelines, to be thoughtful in our planning, and to provide support to our students, families, and staff as things unfold. The role of the Board of Education is to consider the needs of every child in the district as a whole. This work is intended to be a buildings-focused plan that is designed for the long term, taking years to implement. Nothing is going to happen immediately. The actual implementation of each part of the plan will be further discussed and decided upon as those times arise. The later steps will be informed using some of the thinking shared during all of our input sessions, going all the way back to the beginning. And the conversations will continue after the master plan is adopted in the coming weeks. So I'll turn things over to Dr. Pataya, who has some information to share.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here this evening. As part of this process, Ms. Glennon did touch upon slightly, but I'll expand a little bit more. In June of '24, we presented as an administrative team to the Board of Education what we thought our 5-year plans would be regarding what we hope for our young people and for our staff. We presented a 5-year improvement plan to the board to dream a little bit from all aspects of the organization, including human resources, technology, facilities, food service, teaching and learning, special education. That has been part of the process. As you know, our buildings were built in the 1950s. We're going on 50 and 75 years old. At the time in the 50s, schooling was very, very different. And in fact, the approach to supporting children was very, very different. What we're finding today is that our facilities are a hindrance for our ability to program appropriately for all kids. We have academic and social emotional learning goals that we want for all of our people, and we want our staff members to be supported for them. So just a couple of examples. At the high school level, we really want to emphasize career pathways. And we need the facilities to support learning in our schools so that students are career ready when they leave. We have dreams of bolstering the tech ed spaces, culinary spaces. We want to introduce marine science or aquaponics. We have some early childhood spaces that need renovating. So at the high school level, we really need to turn our facilities into a space where students are getting early experiences so they know better what they want to do when they leave. At the middle school level, we want to introduce career explorations, as well as supporting our young people socially and emotionally, because we know at that middle school level, there's a lot happening with our pre-adolescents. And that brings me then to the elementary level. At the elementary level, we are making do with some spaces. And if you're an elementary parent, you know that our cafeteria is also the gym and is also the assembly space. We really need those spaces separated. Across all levels, we are making do with facilities for our special needs children. Oftentimes, we take classroom spaces and divide them up with dividers and provide speech language service next to occupational therapy, next to extra literacy, next to fill in the blank. Highly disruptive environment. We also have full mental health support for our young people now that we didn't have before. In every school, we have a school counselor, social worker, and school psychologist. In many cases, we're retrofitting closets to give spaces to some of our professionals to conduct work with our young people. And we're also, now more than ever, meeting the needs of preschool students. The number of preschoolers who are demonstrating needs beyond regular typical 3- and 4-year-old needs is growing and growing. Our schools weren't built for all of this. And we're making do and we're giving kids a great experience, but it could be better. That's an example of how the facilities get in the way of how we're providing the best programming that we can. We also have deficient nurses spaces. We have these very, very small rooms where nurses conduct meeting the needs of students who are ill. And a child who is ill here is sitting right next to a child who's coming in for a regular checkup or a little some medication for the day. There isn't the appropriate medical space for our nurses. And in many cases, we know that preschool education requires a little bit more elbow space. And in a lot of our schools, we're taking regular sized classrooms, maybe more typical for 5th grade, and making them kindergarten spaces. In today's educational specifications, preschool programs and kindergarten spaces are larger because there are more things in a classroom for little people. These are just some examples of how facility, the bricks and mortar, is hindering our ability to truly program for our students for what they need today. And that has been part of this visioning, has been part of the process that the board has considered in discussing are our facilities meeting our needs and what do we do for the next 20 years. In our planning, obviously with the board and Perkins Eastman, we laid out a timeline, and I know that Patrick Davis is going to be covering this as well. But we're finding that the more times you can say information, the better. So you will hear some things a couple of times tonight. If we were to approve something in the capital improvement plan this May, so after the board takes a vote on the plan, the master plan, the next step is to start to build it into the capital improvement plan. There are many processes and procedures. Some people might call it red tape, but they're necessary. Because a lot of these processes depend on getting the reimbursement from the state. We actually get some money back from the state for building. We have to go through the town bodies. We have to get bonding approved. We have to apply for a state grant for the reimbursement. We have to hire the architect. The Board of Ed has to approve ed specs. At best, we're not opening the doors of a new school till 2031. It's a long process. And you're going to add 5 more years now onto our already aging buildings. And Perkins Eastman did lay out a 20-year plan. So by the time we get to all of our buildings, it could very well be 2046. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Patrick Davis, who's been working closely with us on laying out a plan. He's going to talk about these scenarios around how to take on the timeline to address all the facilities at all the buildings. After Ms. Davis is done, we will allow you to engage with Board of Education members face-to-face in small group at the scenarios on your feet around the room.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you all for coming tonight. I know the goal is to make it out on a Monday evening, so really appreciate you taking the time, taking the time to come out and join us. So as the superintendent mentioned, you may hear a little bit of a repeat on some of the stuff that the board president and superintendent just shared. But again, we think it's important to catch you up on where we've been and then more importantly, where we're going. Before I dive in, I think it's also really important to recognize this is a really great opportunity for you to share your thoughts with us, both big or small. We're going to have breakout sessions where you can dig into some of the proposed recommendations, but then we're actually going to have a station over on the right side of the room there for just open ideas, open dialogue around what else is possible. So want to make sure as you're going through this, thinking about what are those things you want to make sure we're thinking about. Are there scenarios you've been thinking about you want to make sure we hear? So this is a great chance for you to share with us, and obviously we'll bring it back to the board for future evaluation and decision making. So just to go through really quickly, we're going to go give a quick review of where we've been, talk about some of the implementation planning, now we'll talk about the breakout steps, and then highlight some of the next steps. I'm joined by a few colleagues. So again, I'm Patrick Davis. I'm a principal with Perkins Eastman. Mike and Lauren and Mia are in the back corner. So you'll get to meet them through the breakout sessions.
Have your clicker?
Yeah. Maybe it's not on. That'll do it. Okay. So just to catch you up, the board president and superintendent shared this. There were a few key things in what's called a request for proposals, which basically outlines the scope of work that we were to tackle. As the board president mentioned, the first step was to really evaluate the high school portfolio. So obviously, as you know, there's 2 current comprehensive high schools. So there was an idea to explore going down to 1 singular comprehensive high school for the city. We evaluated every single parcel across the district and across the city, and really came down to the conclusion that in order to accommodate a 1 high school model, there just isn't available land to accommodate that. So we made the recommendation a few months ago to maintain the 2 high school model, but invest in both foreign and law to ensure that they're meeting the needs of every single student in the district. So that's the starting point, was go through high schools. We landed on the recommendation to keep the 2 high school model just based on the limited availability of buildable land for a high school. Next, as the board president mentioned, the next exploration was at the middle school level. So if you're not familiar, I think you probably are, but there are 3 current middle schools. There's East Shore, West Shore, and Harborside. So one on sort of the east, west, and center of the city. Based on analysis of building conditions, student travel impacts, site availability, we made the recommendation that the district could go down to 2, and the one that made the most sense to consolidate would be Harborside, maintaining an east-west balance across the district. Next, the RFP included an exploration to go from 8 elementary schools down to 6. So again, similar analysis on building condition, site availability, enrollment, travel distance, things like that. We made the recommendation the district could go down to 6 elementary schools, with a recommendation that Calf Penn and Meadowside were the 2 schools that made the most sense to consolidate. So that brings us to where we are today. The superintendent and the board president mentioned the needs of the district. And I just want to sort of level set here a little bit. It's important to recognize that the needs across the district are pretty expansive. There's a significant amount of capital needs today, but also as we look over the next 10 years. There's a metric called Facility Condition Index. That's an industry standard that measures the condition of a building. So it's looking at things like the roof, the electrical system, the plumbing, all the sort of nuts and bolts of a building. And just about every building in the portfolio is going to be reaching the point of where you have to make that decision, does it make sense to maintain this building and repair it or replace it? And that's a pretty significant milestone for a district to be in, and to have every single building reaching that point. I would put it out here sort of at a critical stage for making capital investments. It's not just one building. You can sort of sequence and stagger things. It's every building across the district. So you're reaching that point where you need to make significant capital investments just to keep operations going, not even talking about improving the educational experience. The other thing to recognize is most of the buildings, not just here in Milford, but around the state and around the country, but certainly here, are old. They were built in the 50s and 60s. Education has changed significantly since then. We're not just sitting in rows of desks and chairs and having a teacher lecture to us. Classrooms are a lot more dynamic. The superintendent mentioned all the needs that happen. So it's the building conditions, but also sort of the misalignment or sort of a lack of alignment with modern education and sort of teaching and learning. So we're at a critical juncture to figure out how do you actually invest in the portfolio. As we'll go through, we made some recommendations, implementation. One of the things to also recognize is you've got a lot of small properties, which does sort of limit the sort of options that can actually happen in terms of how do you build new buildings while maintaining instruction, maintaining safety, So we'll think about that as we go through the scenarios, but it's important to recognize you've got a lot of small properties that really do drive some of the decision making on how projects potentially get sequenced. So just to sort of recap again, current state, you've got 3 elementary schools in the green. On the east side of town, you got 3 on the west side, 2 in the center. You've got the yellow points, which is, again, the middle schools, West Shore, Harborside, and East Shore, and then Foreign and Law flanking on the east and the west. So just sort of moving forward, we made the recommendations from a variety of reasons for Harborside, Calf Pen, and Meadowside. So we're going to talk about the implementation approach. So there's a number of things to factor as we're thinking about sort of implementation. So how do we deliver a plan that actually can be achievable? There's a number of things that are constraints, but also things we wanted to keep in mind as we are going through the implementation. First, we want to make sure every part of the district is seeing investment. So how do you balance investment from east, west, in the center of the city? To the extent feasible, we want to make sure we're avoiding having students move from a temporary location to a temporary location. So this is what we call swing space. So swing space, you'll hear a lot over the next, tonight, but also future conversations. Swing space is essentially the location where students and staff and schools are during a construction period. So we want to make sure that as we're sequencing projects, we heard a lot from families, to the extent feasible, we want to make sure a student's not starting their elementary career, then middle, then high school, and sort of spending most of their educational career in temporary locations. So to the extent feasible, we want to try to make sure we're avoiding that. The superintendent mentioned and board president mentioned the portfolio size and the idea of consolidation, which has significant sort of operational, programmatic, and fiscal impacts for the district. We want to make sure we're not rushing that process, right? We don't want to say everything, as the board president mentioned, nothing is closing tomorrow, but we also don't want to make sure it lingers too long, right? There's rationale and reasons why the district needed to move forward with that. So we want to make sure we're balancing when those things can happen. And for those schools that would be going through a consolidation or closure process, we want to make sure to the extent possible that most or many students have the ability to move to a new facility after the closure. So for example, if school X is going to close, ideally they are going to be moving into a new building. It's not always possible for every single student, but we want to try to maximize this idea of going into a newer facility for communities that are going through the closure process. And then this other idea, there's a lot of different ways to move this around, but we felt it important that in the planning process, school communities stay together for as long as possible. So maintaining sort of a school community, they move from swing space to construction, to the newly modernized building together, rather than, hey, what if we split them up here, half the kids go here and half the kids go there, and we bring them back together. And we want to make sure, there's a lot of value in maintaining one cohesive school community for each of the schools. So we wanted to make sure we're trying to avoid splitting schools to accommodate any sort of swing space planning. So those are some of the objectives. Just a thing on cost. You'll start to see the sort of overall cost of construction. I can say with confidence, construction never gets cheaper. So it's something that we need to factor in terms of how projects get delivered. On the boards and on the scenarios, you'll start to see what is that potential cost for implementation. So if we basically look at the cost of today, and we assume a 3.5% compounding escalation rate. So basically everything is getting 3.5% more expensive every single year. So you'll start to see some of those financial impacts of implementation in the scenarios. But it's important to recognize that going faster does allow you to maybe see some cost savings if you have the capital available to do so. But it's significant cost increases the longer you wait to deliver projects. Superintendent mentioned this. There's a process to go through. I wish I could snap my fingers and you all get brand new buildings tomorrow. The reality is it takes a good amount of time. As you'll see in the scenarios, about 5 school years, or 4.5 to 5 school years worth of worth of time to deliver a building. There's a number of processes that need to happen. So for example, the mayor, or the superintendent mentioned submitting the capital improvement plan request. So the district will submit their request to the city saying, hey, we need X million dollars to start doing these projects. That typically goes in May, but they don't really hear back until the winter and actually get finalized approval from the city until the March timeframe. So you can even see that timeframe is lengthy just for that one little step. But there's a lot of approvals that need to happen with the Board of Aldermen, Permanent Building Committee, coordination for state reimbursements. Then you have to do the procurement, design work, construction. So overall, it's about a 5-year period. The construction timeframe is roughly around 18 months of construction. So it does span typically over 2 school years. So you'll see that work its way into the scenarios as well. But it's important to recognize that, again, these things, we'll try to stagger when possible. You'll start to see things start to overlap. So we're not waiting 5 years to start a new process. We can go a little bit faster, but each individual project will take about 5 years. I mentioned swing space. You know, the amount of construction we're talking about, whether it's new buildings or renovate, are significant projects. We're not talking about just painting the walls or replacing the flooring. These are significant projects. And no matter if you're going to renovate or new construction, we typically assume, and think it's safe to assume, 2 years is typically the time, 2 school years is typically the time for a student that would have to be in a temporary swing space location for construction. So just want to make sure that point is clear. So we're going to go through a few of the approaches. So the way again, this is our initial recommendation. We're going to have opportunity to hear from you. So if there's things you like about this, let us know. If there's things you don't like about it, let us know. If there's things you just want to start over and give us big ideas, we want to hear those too, okay? So we're going to give our recommendation based on some of those guiding initial principles that we sort of landed on our recommendation. So where we started was actually starting at the elementary level, where we would start with JFK and Live Oak, so one on the east, one on the west of the city. We picked these parcels or properties strategically because they're actually 2 of the bigger elementary properties where we actually think you could accommodate new construction on site while students remain in their current building. So students wouldn't have to leave their community. They would stay in their schools. Construction would happen on a building on the parcel, separated safely. But students would be in their in their existing building at JFK and Live Oaks. They would build the building. You would build a brand new building. The students would stay in their current building. They would then move to the new building. Their existing building would probably be demolished over summer. Then that would turn to site work for fields and parking and things like that, and they would have a comprehensive project. And it's important to recognize why we started there. So what that does is allows us to start construction without needing swing space. But then, as we think about the sort of broader portfolio, it allows us to think about when to start sequencing in some of that consolidation and what does that potentially do for downstream impact. So in this scenario, JFK and Live Oaks would be built. The district would go through a rezoning process. Many of the students from Meadowside and Calf Penn would be rezoned there, so students would go to the new buildings. So those buildings will be built for their future capacity to accommodate more students. Can you just repeat the question one more time?
You said a lot of those kids would go to the new building, but where Calf Penn is versus Live Oaks, that doesn't make sense. At Meadowside, they would go to Orchid.
The whole district would have to go through a rezoning process. So
elementary school would not, closed school would not be going.
Could you just say, you close the school, we want to move them into a new building, and that's not.
That's not necessarily completely correct.
Yeah.
Okay. You would earlier,
Yeah.
now you're contradicting yourself, that's all.
I appreciate that. I did say many kids in the attempt that we can get as many kids.
The goal is to move that
Yeah.
into new space.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not going to happen here.
Yeah, the district would have to go through a boundary change process. So what that does is allows us to start thinking about the middle schools. So both middle schools are on relatively small parcels for a middle school, which requires us to think about swing space. So by moving, by opening up potentially the buildings from the elementary schools, students from West Shore and East Shore would then swing into Calf Pen and to Meadowside. Those buildings would receive a little bit of a upgrade to accommodate the middle school program, might need a few additional spaces like science labs, things like that. So there is some budget associated with some upgrades to those buildings to accommodate the middle school program.
And trailers as well, right? Trailer classrooms to fit the additional 150 students?
Yes, there'd be some, we budgeted for some portable classrooms, yes. So the students from the elementary school, from the middle schools would then go to Meadowside and Calf Pen during that construction period. So after that, the two West Shore and East Shore would then finish their construction project, and the students from Harborside would then get rezoned east and west to East Shore and to West Shore. Then we move into phase 3, where we then think about the remaining elementary schools. So Mathewson, Pumpkin Delight, Orange Ave, and Orchard Hills would then move into swing space. And this could either be at Calf Pen, or Harborside could then become an option for temporary swing space location. But again, ideally we're hitting at getting to all of the elementary schools. These are properties that, with the exception of Mathewson, are on the smaller side, so probably can't accommodate on-site construction. So again, they would need temporary location at Meadowside, at Calf Pen, or at Harborside, and that decision can be made with each of those school communities. And then we would finish with the high schools. It's important to recognize that the high schools would be receiving investment over the period, so there could be some programmatic upgrades to those buildings over the next 10 to 15 years or sooner. But the intent being we would end there with students from the construction period would end in phase 4 with law and foreign. So that leaves us with our portfolio of 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools. So just thinking about the sort of sequencing of that, we've got 2 different approaches depending on sort of funding availability. So again, this sort of walks through each of the cycles. So the green periods, that's sort of budget development phase. The light blue is the procurement, approvals, coordination phase. The peach is the sort of design phase, and then the blue is construction. So the way it would work, again, would be JFK and Live Oaks go first. After that, then the West Shore and East Shore would then start their project. Then we would sequence down with Mathewson, Orchard Hills, Orange Ave, Pumpkin Delight, and the 2 high schools to finish the delivery of the capital program. So we weren't sure on sort of funding availability. This scenario assumes you're doing 2 concurrent projects at once in the beginning, which there is some significant cost savings to do so in the long run, but it does require the district to have some additional capital up front. But if that's not the case, you could go through a sort of 1-by-1 sequence and keeping that similar approach of the schools, so JFK and Live Oaks, then the middle schools, and then finishing with the elementary schools and then high school. It extends it out. Obviously, you're going one at a time, so the time period is slower for that. So it adds costs because, again, every year we're doing construction. It adds about 3.5% cost to a project for every year. But it does delay some of those closure decisions. So this would push the last closure out to the last school year being 35-36. So we did look at a few other options, and again, we want to hear your thoughts tonight. So please don't hold back and share your own ideas. But we just want to sort of talk. We have a few things we've heard and a few things we looked at. We heard a lot. Well, why don't you start with the high schools? Everybody has a pathway to the high school. which is true, and that's potentially feasible. But we wanted to make sure you all, and certainly the board and the district, were aware of the potential impacts of that. Given the sort of large amount of money it takes to renovate or build a high school, the funding availability probably only means you can do one at a time. So you do one high school, then the next. But what that does is it really delays some of those school consolidation decisions or implementation out to about 13 years for the last one. So the last school wouldn't go through that consolidation process for about 13. Do you have a question?
Can you just explain what happens in that period of 13 years? Why does it take 13 years?
Yeah, so I'm talking about it would be the last school. So you would do the 5-year process for each of the high schools with some overlap. Then you would move to we basically start this scenario that we showed after the second high school. So then you have to go through the elementary school construction, you'd have to go through the middle school construction, close, and then you'd have to, so after that period, you basically just restart this process after the high school. So it basically pushes most of that out after the high schools are complete. So it just, even in these scenarios, again, we're not closing, schools for 5 to 7 years. So adding the high schools just pushes all of that out further.
You said that you wanted to minimize the number of transitions. And so if you're a student who goes through a transition where you have to go to the swing space and then say you go to school in kindergarten, then you go to the swing space for first and second grade while they do the construction of your school, and then you're going to go back to your school, and then you're going to be going to school in a construction zone in high school, that's pretty disruptive to an education.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to the extent feasible we want to do, there certainly will be some younger kids potentially that maybe at their kindergarten years that, and the reality is I think there's some unfortunate realities of delivering a program like this where it's very difficult to achieve all of the goals of the delivery. So it's a district, it's a conversation we'll have to have with the board and you all about sort of weighing the sort of pros and cons of that, of what's the impact of delaying some of these consolidations. Obviously the district is well versed and more versed than I am talking about the budget realities or the programmatic realities. If that is a priority that you want to push those out, that's a conversation we'll have to have with the board.
That is a priority. That is
Yep.
a priority.
Yep.
I should just say something too. So what the board has done and continues to do is, I'll just use the example of renovations at the high school level. So we're about to break ground here at Law sometime this year. Looking at Sean to see if there's a month. Sometime this year, we're going to close down that hallway that is the tech ed hallway, and we're renovating it completely. And that'll take probably a good 12 to 18 months. And behind that will be, hopefully, the board will approve then the culinary spaces. And if you've been to Foreign's culinary space, it's probably the size of your kitchen, and that needs to be bigger. So that's going to be construction. So unfortunately, because of the age and stage of our buildings, we're going to have a lot of construction in our future.
Yeah, I mean, I really
And so if you close schools or not, we're looking at renovations also.
Why wouldn't you put a stop to some of those plans with the eye toward doing some of those larger renovations? Why are we renovating these little spaces in the interim? It seems like putting band-aids on problems
Exactly. Right. And I think that's why the board is considering building new buildings.
Yeah, so starting with high schools would make more sense.
would make sense. Exactly.
But if you start at high school, now you're spending 13 years before you can retire any buildings. And you're getting to a point in the elementary schools, and I invite you, Patrick, to jump in. We're going to be under 300 students across 8 schools.
But you're only,
Then
you're
you're
not
talking
requiring
about-
spaces if you're using them as swing spaces, right? So that's a little misleading, right?
And your survey itself says that most people voted, the majority of people voted to keep the 8 schools in that survey of all the people. We just looked at it. It's on your website.
The board took action on going from 8 to 6 schools.
So that's the side. That's no community input or public engagement on that.
We had our community sessions last year on that.
And that was really helpful. We were so able to come to that. I asked you to consider that the engagement has been minimal and very difficult to have. So to sit there and say that most of the community wants this consolidation, I think is a flat out lie.
We
I'm
have,
sorry.
well, I'm sorry, but the focus groups and the surveys that we had initially gave us additional, that was for input, okay? The board has looked at a lot of different information and come to the conclusions based on, not in a silo, it's based on a whole lot of different factors.
But you know what,
So-
these focus groups have been siloed, and there's never been a town hall format wherein we can hear each other's questions.
Correct, correct,
Ultimately be
correct.
accountable and answer those questions. So, you know, we're all communicating in silos, and by piecemeal, we as parents have had to put together a composite picture of what's happening. That's the way the communication.
And we're not being all told the same information. When we speak
Basically,
to each
it's
other, we
talking
get
to
different,
school
we have different
population.
stories.
You haven't put this out to the residents of the town, especially neighborhoods like Captain.
Well, we have attempted, it's difficult for us to communicate, put out communications to the city as a whole because we don't have access to people's information.
You're an elected official. You can get out in the community and meet people. That's what elected officials do. You see anything in politics, you know. You go door to door, talk to people about, hey, what are the problems that you guys see? You don't just expect to get reelected every 2 years.
We have,
Putting out your sign.
we have attempted to engage the media, which has been difficult. We have enlisted the help of the city to put information on their social media. And we've had coverage on some of the radio stations and the TV stations. It's very difficult to get the press, the New Haven Register and stuff like that, to put this information out there. That's our ability to connect with the community in terms of widespread information. Our school parents, if you're a school parent, then you've been getting lots of communications from the school district about this process.
Not very
And
clear though. It's kind of hidden in newsletters down very.
there have been numerous instances of individual communications that have gone out to the email channel, as well as the Friday updates that has had, every time we have a board meeting, it's in the Friday update that there's.
There isn't at the very, very bottom of.
I think when I've seen it, it's often been upfront in terms of the newsletter when we have a board meeting. So if you are a parent, you have been getting consistent communication regarding this process.
So one of the.
So if we could.
I agree with that. One of the things that you said is that you have multi-factors that are playing into this decision. Would you like to share what those factors are for the group? Because all we have is the information of these little groups that we go to, and then we see time and time again these long-range plans. They take all these opinions, and then it seems like you guys do whatever you want against it, which is most of the parents.
Patrick, did you have something?
Yeah, I think it's an important point to your question, actually a point you raised earlier. I think it's important to recognize there's sort of two factors at play. There's the sort of physical condition of the buildings. There's a capital cost related to that, right? There's a physical cost to replace a building, fix it, all of the things. That's important, right? We talked about the aging buildings. That is a factor. But I think there's also an experiential factor that was driving a lot of, I don't want to speak for the superintendent or the board president, but there's a programmatic and experiential side of things that was factored into the board and the district's thinking around what does program delivery look like for schools and what's the experience that Milford wants for their students. The reality is there's enrollment requirements to achieve most of the things that we all want for kids, right? We want full-time teachers, we want full access to specials, we want all these things from a programmatic lens that I think we all agree that we want for our students. The reality is there's a budget pressure to actually achieve those in the current environment, in the current situation where the district finds itself in. My understanding is that the district has already had to make hard decisions around program offerings at the middle school level the last few years, so it's already started, right? And I think this idea of consolidation, yes, the building is one factor of it, but I think it's also important to really look at that other side of what's the program we want for our kids. And the reality is, unfortunately, Milford, like a lot of districts around the country, are having to face the hard reality of, do we have the resources to deliver those things that we want for our kids? And if the answer is no, one of the solutions is, how do we reduce our portfolio so we reduce some of the redundancies, we reduce some of the inefficiencies, and we're able to deliver the program that makes sense for our students. So I just want to make sure that, I think we're talking a lot about buildings. I don't want to lose sight around what teaching and learning looks like and program delivery looks like in schools, because I do think that was really, outside of the buildings, the driving force for this idea of consolidation. I don't know if you want to add anything. I want to make sure you get
Back to what I had said initially, the request from the city agencies to do a long-range facility study was rooted in exactly that. We've had declining enrollment, and they are finding our budget requests, which are literally carrying over what we're doing today. We've had very little innovation, we've had very little new programs added that are being, they are not sustainable in their eyes. Now, I will say, I think I can say with pretty good certainty at this point, the next time the Board of Education has a $1 million budget reduction from the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Finance, we will again be looking at having to close a school within 4 months. 4 months' time, and we cannot close elementary schools without redistricting everyone. So they will not fit because of the way our buildings are being used today. So another $1 million budget cut from the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Finance, and we will again be looking at closing a school in a very short period of time instead of the planful and thoughtful process that people have said they want. And that is what we're attempting to do, at a planful and thoughtful process on a way to be a more efficiently operated school district. Yes. And if that's how you're looking at it, we want to hear that from you as you go through the stations tonight.
We said that at the last meeting. A lot of people said that at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Nothing got affected.
Hey, just to,
that's why we're getting a little bit like.
yeah, no, certainly
We're going to vote on this next week. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Maybe I just missed it in what you said, but it just doesn't, it just, you know, it's 5 years here, 13 years there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, it just doesn't, it's not seamless.
There's not a perfect plan. There's not a perfect plan. So any plan that we implement is going to have its pros and cons.
Yeah. So it might make sense that I can meet with you on the, we can sort of walk through some of the scenarios on the charts, and as we yeah.
Now, like with dates right now, if you are a CAF Penn kindergartner, you are closing CAF Penn in 29-30. They're in 4th grade. They're then getting moved to a different elementary school, and then they're going to go to 6th grade, half of them at Harborside for 1 year. Then Harborside will be closed. It will then move to East Shore. They will then go to high school. So like, I think in particular, the Meadowside and CAF Penn kindergartners with this timeline are disrupted in every school.
I would say.
That's a legitimate concern.
I would say 2nd grade and younger if you're going by.
I have 4 grade kids that are going to be in the school district, 2 of them in September, kindergarten. So I hear you, you know, and we are listening. We are hearing what you're saying.
This isn't a well thought out plan. It's kind of hard to see. If a kid was in kindergarten, can we just have I know it's not a perfect scenario, but what would it be like? Just an example, if they were kindergarten at this school, what it could look like going up to 12th grade?
Which school are you referring to? CAF Penn? Yeah.
If we could just do one at a time, please.
Yep. I want to answer the question, okay?
Can I just say one thing? The format of this was you're presenting, then we're splitting up into groups to have these conversations with the board. So
Yep.
I think it'd be helpful if we just get through this part,
Yep.
so then everybody can ask their questions in smaller
Yeah.
groups.
So just I'll walk through the scenario because there was a lot of questions on it, but I think if you didn't hear, the point was we do want to break up and have some smaller conversations. I think we can have some dialogue with the board. And to your question, sir, just to your point, we are going to take your feedback. We're actually, I think, changing the approach in terms of the upcoming meetings. We're taking your feedback for you here today. We're going to present some other options based on the feedback at the next board meeting. So I don't believe, I don't want to speak out of turn.
It is still to be determined, but we are listening. We are hearing. That's why we're here. We want to hear what you have to say, and we will decide next steps once we digest the information that we're taking on tonight. If we could just, you've had a couple of times, if we could just finish the conversation
Yeah, so I just want to walk through the one scenario, and then we'll take a few more questions.
I have a quick question. Talking about like the quality of education for our children, which is my primary concern, what happens to the staff with the children and the quality of education that our kids are going to be receiving during all of this?
I think everyone in this room, I would hope, would agree that we have A+ staff. Our staff will meet the challenge. But this is a buildings-focused plan. The intent is that this is buildings-focused. But in terms of the educational process and the, it stays. I mean, there's no changes to that. All the things we have in place today.
You're not losing staff when you do this?
We may lose staff from attrition, we may lose some staff,
We already did.
but we've already lost a lot of staff. I mean, we had to make significant adjustments to the middle school staffing this year because of the budget reduction of over $1 million that we got for this operating year. So we have already reduced staff, but we would like to get going with the presentation.
Yeah.
Let's finish this up.
So I'll walk through a kindergarten at Meadowside and Calf which I think was the overarching request. And then, like I said, we can have smaller conversations, but I do want to walk through that. So a current kindergarten for 25-26 would then be in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. This would be their last year. This is when the JFK and Live Oaks are opening. So their fifth grade, they would pivot to their swing space. So they would then move to, actually they would stay, at fifth grade, the students would then move to JFK, Live Oaks, or the other east and west elementary schools. Then they would then, for sixth grade, go to, let's just make sure I got this right. They would go back to Calf Pen for swing space. Yep. Yep, so they would go to Calf Pen for swing space, and then they would be fifth, sixth, seventh, and they would start their high school, and the high school would not be starting until after they graduate. Sorry, I probably didn't do that eloquently enough. But they would be, those groups of students would have a little bit of the sort of transition disruption from the fifth to sixth grade and having to go back to their existing school for swing space. So I'm just throwing it, like, we want to hear ideas. Like, if there's the ideas you have to alleviate that, we want to hear them, right? And that's really the point of today. As this board president mentioned, there is no perfect plan. I wish I could give you a magic answer and say, every kid's going to have the, A+ experience in every step of the process. If there's ideas you have to make it better, we want to hear that, okay? There's also these overarching things around how long do we wait for consolidation to happen? There's other things that need to be factored in that the board and the district have to think about. The experience of the students is critical, right? We don't want to lose sight of that. But there's a number of things that have to be factored in. So maybe there's a way that, instead we delay a year so that, I don't know, there's a gap or something. I don't know, just thinking about ideas that you guys can help share with us, and we can start to incorporate and share with the district leadership for decision making. Because as I mentioned, there's a lot of factors that need to be factored in, but this is one of them. So we want to hear if you have ideas on that. A few more questions, then we're going to break into groups.
Would it be possible to not break into groups and have an open forum? I think we're all.
No, we're going to stick with the agenda and break into groups, okay? And I do want to also remind everybody that the condition of the buildings are going to require renovation in some way, shape, or form. So the renovation, but we're hearing you. We understand about the transitions, and maybe we need to relook at that again. But we're going to finish the presentation, and then we will, we'll break out into the sessions so that Perkins Eastman and the board can. So. Okay,
maybe we go here, and then we'll break. I saw your hand was raised.
Do you still have the presentation to make?
Agree with that lady that it should be an open forum instead of small groups, because I attended the last one and everything gets usually lost.
I'm not sure that open forum will bring us a lot of productive information, a lot of productive.
And we've heard some interest from others too.
We're going to do breakout sessions.
Yeah.
I think the decision has already been made. We are here just to listen, and then we go home and the plan.
Do you have more presentation to go?
I just want to again preview the sort of the upcoming meeting is to review the feedback we're getting today. So again, the feedback you're giving is we're going to actually take it into account and think about, are there modifications or new scenarios that we need to bring to the board based on your feedback. So it is not just us presenting to you. We want to hear your thoughts. Like I said, maybe there are tweaks to what's there that could make it better, or maybe there's new ideas you want to share. I'm giving you my authentic response that we are going to listen and we are going to do what we can to try to accommodate. Again, there is an overarching set of needs that the district needs to think about, or challenges or constraints. So we want to make sure we're factoring all of this. So I want to get 2 questions and then we're going to break. So your hand has been raised. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you. So I completely understand the idea that all of these buildings need to be worked on. We're all, I think we're all in agreement about that. My question is more holistic, which is the city that we all love and live in. I have an next door neighbor who is pregnant and has a 2-year-old. My recommendation to her, based on this plan, is to get out of the Our housing prices are gonna fall. Like if you're newly coming into town and you're looking at schools and what's going on, that's a very scary prospect.
And class 10 just became a great graded school, and now we're gonna lose that. Like, it means a lot to parents.
Could you pinpoint the sort of 1 or 2 things why you're making that recommendation so we can think about the root sort of challenge?
I mean, my concern is that if the aldermen are gonna cut $1 million, then you focus maybe on one school here and there, but to do this massive project for a very, very extended period of time that really focuses on like a potential part generation of kids that are gonna be going up the Milford, being Milford residents, like we're gonna lose them, we're gonna lose people, and it's gonna be a really hard time. So that's my biggest concern, knowing that like we're in kind of a craft situation, that historically we haven't made these decisions earlier and that these buildings need to be worked on, but this seems frightening.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick point. So I think the superintendent mentioned a little bit, you're at a point with the conditions of your building that you are going to have to invest in the buildings or they are not going to operate. I just want to be, they're safe right now, kids are safe, and teachers are doing a great job. You're reaching the point in the next 5 years that you're going to have to make significant improvements just to keep the lights on, keep the HVAC working, keep the rooms dry. I think the fiscal question that we all need to think about is that good money spent, or do you want to actually spend a little bit more, but also increase and improve the educational experience? So there's no getting around the fact that you need to invest a lot of money and do a lot of building work. I think the question is, do you just do that and just do these sort of Band-Aid projects to fix things as they're breaking, hopefully right before, or do you actually take this opportunity to turn a 1950s and 1960s building portfolio into a portfolio that works for today's learners? That's a difficult question, obviously. We think about impacts, but that's a real question, right? Because there's no getting around spending millions and millions and millions of dollars. The question is, do you spend that money just to improve the building operations and the systems, or are you making actually substantial changes for what teaching and learning looks like, not just for today, but for 30 to 50 years? You're at a point now where I think you need to actually reset most of these buildings because they don't work operationally, they don't work in many cases programmatically and academically. You mentioned the needs for special education learners. It would be very difficult for me if I had a special education student to trust going to a 1950s building and knowing they're going to meet their needs. So thinking about every single student in the district, I think is critical, but that long-term viability of the building is really important to think about and not just sort of put Band-Aid fixes, because that's what most districts have done for decades. And you end up in this spot and you're at a point now where you have potential support to actually invest in the buildings, and it's a good opportunity. Yes, there's things we can, happy to tweak and make it better, but I would hate to lose the opportunity and spend hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not talking 1 million, 5 million, hundreds of millions of dollars just to keep the lights on. So.
All right, so Mr. Davis, we have Board of Education members, your elected officials, divided up across 3 stations in the room. You could choose to talk to them directly and give them your thinking, your ideas, your opinion, whatever it may be. They're there waiting to hear from you. There's an architect at each station as well. If you would like your opinion to be part of public record, put your opinion on a sticky note. All sticky notes are put on a document and put on public record on our website, okay? So there are sticky notes all throughout the room. You have the option of going to the station, talking to a board member and architect, giving you them your thinking, and or putting it on a sticky note. So we're going to break into small groups at this point, so please stand and move to a station. Thank you.
So 3 is on the, so I'll go work backwards.
You go.
3 is on the right side here. That is, hey, I don't like any of these. I'm going to give you my own ideas. I've got different ideas that we could actually think about. So that's sort of an open-ended group. I'll be at that one over there. 2 in the middle is the sort of slower pace delivery. If there's tweaks you think that could make this work better, share that one. This is the 1 is the more accelerated version of the implementation plan we presented. Again, if there's things you like about it, share. If there's things you want to tweak, there's opportunity. We want to understand how we can make this better. Or like I said, if there's new ideas you want us to think about that haven't been presented, or to dig through some of the why high school may be better, or middle schools, we want to talk about that over there, okay? So 3, 2, 1, and then like Superintendent said.
Ask all Board of Education members to please join a group.
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to say to everyone in